So everybody, welcome to the call tonight. We're going to get underway. The call tonight is on bullying and special needs. Again, my name is Ryan Knowles, Outreach Coordinator for the Bully Project. I'm joined tonight by my colleague, Melissa Newber, and we're really lucky to have Sheldon Horowitz from the National Center for Learning Disabilities speaking with us tonight and giving us an overview of bullying and special needs. As we all know, bullying is an incredibly important issue, but especially for special needs students who are 2 to 3 times more likely to be bullied at school. And with that being said, I want to encourage those of you on tonight's call following it to please check out our special needs toolkit. That is at specialneeds.thebullyproject.com. You can find it under our tools and resources link on our website. Again, that's specialneeds.thebullyproject.com. But with further ado, I would actually like to just give you a little bit of an overview on tonight's call and give you a little bit of background on our speaker, Sheldon Horowitz. Sheldon is the Director of Learning Disability Resources and Essential Information at NCLD. Before NCLD, he served as Associate Director of the Learning Diagnostics Center at Schneider Children's Hospital in Long Island, New York. Sheldon has taught primary, secondary, and college levels and worked as a consultant to school districts throughout the New York City metropolitan region. And his interests include educational assessment, fetal alcohol effects on children, language-based learning disabilities, disorders of hyperactivity and attention, and learning disabilities in adolescents. We are incredibly lucky to have him on the call tonight and to inform you on special needs bullying. And without further ado, Sheldon, it's all yours.
Well, thank you very much, Ryan. It really is a pleasure to be here. NCLD has been one of the founding partners of the Bully Project, and it's really been a privilege to work with Lee Hirsch and the entire team. The work that they've done, both in terms of the documentary, preparing the special needs toolkit, all of the work that they've done in schools, many webinars, many seminars, many blog opportunities with parents and educators, and some of the work that they've done in the policy arena with program partners like NCLD has really taken the issue of bullying to a whole nother level, and we all owe the project a huge debt of gratitude. As people were signing on, I was listening to the places that people were coming from. We have someone with us from Hawaii, from Canada, from Boston, from Los Angeles, from Minnesota, from Florida. Just fabulous. And as I'm listening to the people introduce themselves, making some mention of what they do, it sounds like there are lots of experts on the phone. So what I hope to do today is provide an overview. I think I'm talking to the choir, but if even one of us, and I'm sure I will, learns something more or different about bullying and about what it is that we can do individually and as a community, I think we'll all be in a better place, and the time that we've spent tonight together will be well worth the effort. When I talk to people about bullying, the first thing that they bring up to me are images of these tough kids, these wisecracking kids who are taunting and verbally embarrassing each other and pushing and poking and tripping and threatening and grabbing possessions and defacing property. And yeah, that's part of the bullying experience. But then there are these other kids who, because of their small stature or their difficulties with expressive language, they're somehow isolated and even rejected by their peers. These are the kids who have trouble on the school bus because people don't pay attention to them, or people actually taunt them when they try to join a conversation. These are the kids who are fearful of walking through the halls in school because any number of times they've been shoved or pushed or teased or taunted or have their backpacks yanked, causing them to fall backwards or bang themselves. These are the kids who sit in class very often with teachers who are well-meaning but unknowingly communicate that there's something about this kid that's vulnerable and maybe underneath the expectations or perceived as not being as competent as others. And so the message that these unwitting adults are communicating is that these kids are dummies, or these kids are stupid, or the words that you hear kids say about themselves. We send our kids, all of our kids, and certainly kids with special needs, to school, and they're there 6 and 7 and 8 and sometimes 9 and 10 hours a day. Even going on the ball field is not something that can release tension for them. Their worlds are tied up in this worrisome energy about being taunted and bullied. And there's so much that we can do. There's so much that we really do need to do. I think back when in 2010 the U.S. Department of Homeland Security came up with a slogan. I really like it when I think about it in the context of bullying. And we all need to be on the lookout for bullying. And if we see something, we should say something, and we should do something. Now, Ryan mentioned the incidents, and I think it's worth talking about it just for a minute. I don't think it's easy to ascribe a number in particular, because as many times as you ask, that's as many numbers you'll get, that's as many surveys as there are. That's it's hard to sort of collect all those data in one place and have it be meaningful. But from any number of sources, the prevalence of bullying in society and in our schools in particular with regard to special needs kids and kids in general is nothing short of staggering. 10% of kids report having been the victims of severe bullying at least once during the school year. 75% report being bullied at least once during the past 10 months. Every day, more than 160,000 kids skip school, not because they're sick, because they're fearful of being bullied. 40 to 75% of bullying incidents that take place in school happen out of the sight of adults. They happen in between class breaks. They happen in the lunchroom. They happen in the bathrooms. They happen in the hallways. They just keep on happening. Right? Think about this. 30% of kids who suffer from food allergies, and we know lots of special needs kids do, but lots of kids who don't have special needs do as well. 30% of kids who suffer from food allergies are reported to be bullied in school, and sometimes what that means is they're actually having the allergen, the stuff that they're allergic to, being waved at them and thrown at them. 30% of kids report, of those kids who've been bullied, 30% report that they've sometimes brought weapons to school. We know that 60% of boys who engage in bullying behaviors sometime during their first to 9th grade experience in school were convicted of a crime by the age of 24. I mean, the consequences are just unbelievable. And this is really cool. The average, it's really upsetting. The average bullying episode lasts 37 seconds. Okay? And school personnel are reported to notice or intervene only 1 in 25 incidents. I mean, talk about a problem. So who are these kids, right? What's the likelihood that someone can miss them? Well, these are the second graders with dyslexia, for example, who have difficulty decoding words, and they may misspeak when they're in class. And every time they're called on to read out loud or to write something on the board, there it goes again, the giggles and the chuckles, and they're being made fun of. And that carries over to the cafeteria. That marks the child as the victim and places him or her at risk. I'm sorry, that'll disappear in a second. Then there's the 5th grader with LD, or attention deficit disorder. And we know these kids, their enthusiasm just sort of spills over. They're really creative. They have deep knowledge of certain subject matter, but sometimes they get excluded and they get teased because of the kinds of behavioral sequelae, the kinds of behaviors that they exhibit. The 9th grader who's told, all right, we have some new gym equipment. Don't go there. Don't touch it. We're not going to use it today. But because they want to fit in with their friends, and they get egged on, what happens? They, of course, break the rules, and they're being victimized by their peers because of those difficulties they have holding back. And then it's the older kids, too. It's just not the younger kids. An 11th or 12th grader who struggles with rapid reading or short-term memory, comprehension problems as they're working in school. So many of these kids, for example, are interested in physics and robotics and, even poetry, whatever. But their guidance counselors, and I hate to say this, their guidance counselors actually look at them and say, well, that this is really hard. I don't know that you can really do that. Maybe you should pick something that's easier when you think about college. The term that I like to refer to when it comes to these older kids, and the younger kids as well, but certainly the older kids, is the soft bigotry of low expectations. And as far as I'm concerned, that too is a type of bullying. So what I really think we should do is open it up to conversation. Let's all sort of get into the mix. What I think we all need to acknowledge is that there is no reason why anybody should wait. Right? Bullying is a problem. We all know it's a problem, and we need to do something as a community. All of us need to do something as a community to make sure that the process of identifying the problem, the solutions that can be built into individual situations, but school-wide situations, are those that can be adapted and adopted and embraced by the entire community. And it's everybody's problem. It's not just a problem for the child who is the recipient or the target of the bullying or the bully himself, but it's also, as we all know, about bystanders. It's about a community of care. It's about civil rights. It's about educational rights. It really is about everybody and all children. So, Ryan, why don't we open it up and let's see what people have to share and what questions we can answer. And I'd love to open it up to the community.
Great. So if you have a question, please simply press *6. You'll be brought to the top of our queue, and you'll be able to ask a question. If you don't feel comfortable asking a question directly, you can also chime in on Twitter or on our Facebook page using the hashtag #ExpertSeries. Again, just have to press *6, and you can join the conversation. 734.
734?
Yep, that's you.
Hello?
I can hear you.
Okay, this is Jim from the Diocese of Michigan. It's a statement. I like to use the term bullying is perpetrated instead of bullying happens.
Can you give a little bit more detail on your thought process behind that?
Bullying is, in my experience and in my definition, an aggressive action. It does not just happen, whether it is spontaneous or planned.
Great.
Right. Jim, I think
that's Sheldon. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think the perpetration, if you will, of bullying, what makes it so unique and so insipid is it that it's a repeated aggressive behavior that intentionally causes harm to its victims. I mean, it's an intentional act, and in that sense, it is really the perpetration of the act. And it's that imbalance of power that's meant to cause harm, be it social harm or physical harm or verbal harm. It's that imbalance in power that makes it just so outrageous. So I like the word perpetration. I think that the perpetrator and perpetrating the bullying experience, I think it really resonates.
So we have another question in from 419.
Hi, my name is Mike. I live in Toledo, Ohio, and I have an 11-year-old daughter that's been diagnosed with Asperger's. The challenge that I have is that my daughter is bullied regularly, but she really honestly is so fun-loving and wants so much to be friends with the people that treat her this way that oftentimes she doesn't recognize that it's occurring. I look at it and I think that it really is probably better for her, and it's probably healthy that she doesn't know it and really could care less. But I got to tell you, as a parent, it bothers me so very much that, and I haven't done it, of course, but sometimes I just want to wring these kids' necks.
Well, Mike, I think the point is very well taken. I think when you have a child like your daughter, who is, good to the core and wants to be friendly and, almost doesn't read the social cues that makes it so difficult for adults to watch her in that bullying paradigm. One of the things that works really well, and it may at some point be something that you can do with your daughter as well, is to find a group of non-disabled, non-Asperger, non-LD, non-ADHD kids who are popular, and find ways to include her in that mix so that she doesn't have to be the one with the eyes or with the antenna up for the bullying. It can be the kids in the community around her who are protective of her in that way. Sadly, the adults don't always do it, and you would hope that the adults would. But it is altogether possible that as she grows and as she matures and as she develops, pockets of strengths that she can share with her community, they'll accept her for who she is and what she can do and where her talents lie, not what she can't do and where her vulnerabilities lie. And it would be great if the community would come both to her defense and also join her in making the community responsible for kids like herself and all kids so that they have a better place.
Great. Sheldon, this is Melissa from the Bully Project. I wanted to pose a question that we received via email that I thought was a great question. It's from your experience teaching special needs, has there been a certain model that you've noticed instilled in schools that works to foster empathetic school climates and decrease rates of bullying against of special needs children? And if so, what does that model look like?
Well, I can't say that I know very much about school-wide models. I know that there are a number of really fine models and some great programs, some centers that actually do work across the country. There are a couple in New York, there are a couple national. But I would say this, having been in a bunch of schools, some at one point terrifyingly dangerous and scary for all kids, not just those with special needs, because of how aggressive and how dangerous the physical environment was. What turns those schools around is a strong leader. So there have been times when I've gone into a school and needed to leave because there was no way my being there, I wasn't going to learn anything other than, it wasn't a friendly place and let's just move on, to going back and seeing something over the principal's office. As kids walked through the hall, the principal stood in front of her office, and there were these big black letters that said, "Not on my watch." Not on my watch. And I don't mean watch like on my time, like, while I'm watching. It means not in my school, meaning the culture of the school and the culture of the leadership and not tolerating bullying from anyone and looking for ways to include everybody in that solution, I think is the model. Without strong leadership, without dedication to making the community a safe and embracing and inclusive place, you can, throw kids into the assembly hall as much as you want, and you can show as many movies as you want, and you can put as many mothers on a bus as you want, but it needs to be a school-wide approach that changes the culture of the place so that everybody looks after everybody else, and that's what a strong leader can do.
We have another question here from 856. Are you there?
Yes, hi. I guess my question is similar to Mike's earlier. My daughter has Asperger's and is in third grade, and I think what's really hard is the girls that they're really, quote unquote nice girls that are doing it to her and saying, why don't you go over there and go play somewhere else? And she's coming to me and telling me that it's happening, and I'm kind of at a loss at what to do as a parent with the school and how to engage them in the conversation, because what they're saying to me is, oh, that sweet little girl she's not possibly doing that, because these are really nice kids supposedly that are doing this, and it's not that physical bullying that you see all the time. So
Right.
are there any suggestions on how to kind of navigate this with the school in terms of getting them to understand that, nice kids can sometimes do bad things?
Right. Well, nice crossing guards and nice bus monitors and nice principals and nice coaches and nice teachers, nice parents sometimes do things that are not nice. Building awareness, bringing to the attention of people that they've done something that's been harmful or that's been hurtful, that could be a first step. Especially if there are girls who are doing it repeatedly, and they may not realize they're doing it. They're just doing it because, that's who we are, and it's easier to do it, and, they're not really thinking about it. The other way of thinking about this, and it may be a little bit of a forcing action, is that clearly your child, as a child with Asperger's, has an IEP. And part of what is in that IEP is the mandate to provide some social connectivity or some language skill development or the development of self-advocacy skills and such. If it's in the IEP and it means that she needs to have practice doing those things in the settings where other kids can be involved and can be learning as well, the IEP can almost be a forcing action to make just those kinds of things happen. So that would be an interesting conversation for you to have the next time you meet with the Committee on Special Education, or the person in charge of that committee, or the assistant principal, or a guidance counselor, or whomever is monitoring and managing her IEP goals. Write it into the IEP, make it a mandate, and then how that unfolds could be a group with just those kids with your daughter, figuring out how it should look. Creating a model, having them engage together. I think it'll take some creativity, but the IEP is a very powerful tool, and it could be part of that creating a sea change of social impact in a school. Changing the sort of the mantra and how people care and deal with each other.
That's great. Thank you.
Sheldon, I want to pose another question that was written in. It was actually from a woman named Sarah. She says, I don't have a special needs child, but I want to make sure that my children are always respectful of their peers. I want to instill in them the notion that difference is something to be celebrated rather than to be used against each other. As a parent, what can I do to teach my children to be empathetic and inclusive of all?
Well, thank you, Sarah. I wish every mom was like you, and every kid had access to a mom just like you, and every kid had access to kids like your kids who have access to a mom like you. I think the whole notion of helping kids see the world through the lens of neurodiversity, and that difference is not bad, it's just different, is very powerful. And kids are leaders. Kids can really change the world for the better. They can certainly change who they are and where they live and how they behave in those settings. A lot of the challenge is that, I think we all have a certain level of discomfort when we're around things that we're not familiar with. So, a child who's watching a peer struggle with reading is just imagining that they are struggling with reading, and it might be because they're lazy or they're unprepared, but they don't really understand the nature of that disability. And it may be that kid's parents or brothers or uncles or cousins or their whole family may be dyslexic or may have reading and language-based learning disabilities. And so, the exposure to the kid in the wheelchair, or the exposure to the Asperger's child, or the exposure to the language-based learning kid, or the exposure to the ADHD kid, with some information about what it is what it's like to live in their skin, is usually enough for that child to say, aha, now I get it, and if charged with being part of the solution, the next time they see those kids getting bullied or getting picked on or getting excluded, there's every reason to believe that they'll say, well, wait a second, what does that have to do with our not including them? Or, they'll be part of the fix. But I think a lot of it comes with exposure. A lot of it comes with a direct exposure to something that they wouldn't otherwise either have been exposed to or understand anything about. So talking about it, explaining it, and helping them sit in someone else's shoes could be hugely impactful.
So we have, let's see, we've got quite a few questions lined up here. We have one from 808. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Sarah calling from Honolulu, Hawaii, and I have a 10-year-old, a fourth grader, who is autism or Asperger's with ADHD. We've switched him out of the DOE school and had to put him into private school because he's been both physically and verbally abused, actually in both settings. It's just, but I do agree with you. It's definitely how the leadership handles it, because his new principal has taken a very proactive stand on it. But what we've kind of, with inspiration from the Bully Project, have kind of created a program here in Hawaii called Embrace Uniqueness, which was embracing autism and promoting empathy. And we've talked to schools, but one of the questions I keep coming from teachers is there any book that you would be able to recommend that they could read to students regarding special needs and bullying, or books that the teachers could read kind of quickly that give them a better understanding of the situation?
Oh, very good question. And off the top of my head, I don't think that I can come up with a title. I do know that there are, in the materials that we prepared for the Bully Project, there are recommended readings. There's an educator's guide and a parent's guide. And in those toolkits, I believe there are titles that are available from the library and, for purchase. I don't know if there are any professional texts that would be geared more towards school leaders, but I could be mistaken. That's something that I think you can follow up with the folks at the Bully Project, and I'd be happy to provide them with, with some recommendations when I get back to my office. But off the top of my head, I really, other than the toolkits that we prepared in collaboration with the, Bully Project, I can't think of any titles off the top of my head. But good luck with that project. I think the whole notion of emerging uniqueness is fabulous and good for Hawaii.
Thank you.
So we have a call-in and question from 443. You there?
Yes. Hello. My name is
Hello.
Cindy, and I'm calling in. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. I'm calling in from Maryland. I want to thank you for the call this evening. I do have an 8-year-old who has gone through extreme bullying. It's been physical, and it has also been verbal. He has been diagnosed with Asperger's, like many of the other callers have identified. But what I'm working through now is we just learned from a professional that he's seeing that he is now severely depressed. He did attempt suicide, actually, in the past. He's severely depressed, and he has post-traumatic stress disorder. So he refuses, of course, to go to school, but I pulled him out of school. I just wanted to ask the expert what, I'm sure he's experienced with this, what he would recommend as sort of next steps in addition to counseling.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that your child has been so traumatized by the bullying experience. I think depression is constitutional, but with some kids it's something that can be reversed. I think the post-traumatic stress disorder characteristics are the kinds of things that unfortunately last over time and need to be unpacked really carefully. And in a child who may not have the language to be able to say just exactly what it is that they experienced and what they are experiencing as a response to their unfortunate reality with their peers, it could be something that takes time. That said, I think the most important thing to do, and it sounds like you've made efforts to do it already, is not to keep your child isolated. There is a community within which your child can feel safe, and that's the most important thing. If they were to be in a small situation, caring teachers who are, have their eye on the prize and focus on what it is that she or he can do to build some of the strengths back up, to build some of the trust back up, that's the most important thing. Because at some point, as they get older and as their biology changes, 8 becomes 12 pretty quickly. And 12 means that hormones start flowing. And, as soon as you get the hormones flowing, they're starting to take risks. And they're experimenting with their social groups, and you want them to be successful, and you want them to have confidence, and you want them to have come from a safe place with trusted friends and trusted adults. So most important is to have them in a safe environment for sure. In terms of depression, I hope that you've pursued, and it sounds like you have, opportunities for your child to be both evaluated and treated behaviorally, maybe pharmacologically. There may be some advantage to having some mood stabilizer or mood elevator medication so that you can have access to your child and continue to work with them and continue to build some of those skills that he or she is going to need. Most important, again, is just to have them safe.
Thank you.
So, Sheldon, this is Ryan here, and one of the things that we get a lot from parents who are within the Bully Project community is, what steps can parents take to help educators, or whether you're a parent, an activist, a student, to help educators ensure that they're maintaining an inclusive classroom, especially when it comes to special needs students. How can we work with those educators to provide that for special needs students?
Interesting question. I think the issue of inclusion is one that we get asked at the National Center for Learning Disabilities as well. I think the operative word, and sometimes it's popular and sometimes it's not, the operative word is appropriate and responsible. So, there may be instances where including a child in everything that happens in the classroom is not appropriate. They may need something separate, something different, something modeled in a slower kind of a format, or they may need some accommodations or even modifications that make them different. The important thing, though, is that it's not what they do that we need always to pay attention to, because we have technologies, we know strategies, we have ways to monitor progress, we have ways to teach them what it is we want them to know, and we can test them over time. What we want them to do is we want them to fit in. We want to acknowledge who they are in that context. So there are ways to include a child with his or her peers so that they feel valued, so they don't feel intimidated, they don't feel less, they don't feel undervalued in any way. And the bullying experience chips away at that, right? What bullying does is it systematically, over time, in a sort of either an active or a passive kind of a way, creates an imbalance and makes kids feel less, makes kids feel less valued. So if a parent knows that a teacher, for example, is, having children go around the room and read out loud, and that places your child at risk because he or she is not a great reader. So you need to speak with that teacher and say, I want my kid to be included in some meaningful way. And maybe it means giving them an opportunity to go home and practice the reading the night before, or listen to it on a tape, or read along with a tape recorder, or draw a picture of what it is and or tell a story about it rather than read it out loud, which places them at risk for being, diminished in some way and taunted in some way. I think there are responsible ways for schools and educators and the system to support kids in an inclusive and a protective and a celebratory way. And every child is going to be different. Every classroom is going to be different. Every educational challenge is going to be different. But it doesn't mean that they're off the hook. It means that it has to happen because the Individuals with Education, the Act, IDEA, and the American with Disabilities Act isn't just about some kids or some citizens. All means all. And if we take it seriously, which we do, schools need to take it seriously. And sometimes we need to be that voice to say, how is my child fitting in? How are they being able to demonstrate their strengths? How are they being included in responsible ways? And it doesn't have to be the same way. And we don't have to aspire, as long as we aspire to, address their needs and reach high enough on that level of expectations where we're not diminishing our expectations in an unreasonable way, there are a gazillion ways that we can celebrate our kids in those environments. Maybe a parent needs to spend time in school. Maybe a parent needs to ask the teachers those questions or reflect back after having spoken to a child. I didn't read today. I didn't do this today. I didn't get called to the board. Or, ask the teacher, why is that not happening? Aren't there ways that my child can be included where they feel like they're part of the mix? Because not being included in those ways is almost like pointing this, blinking neon arrow at them and saying they're different, they're less, they're not as capable, and it's okay. You can bully.
Sheldon, that was great. I am just going to pose this question. We just got in via Twitter from Mary Widener. I apologize if I butchered that. But it's, when do negative attitudes toward peer difference begin to develop, and can they be mitigated at a young age to prevent bullying?
Great question, Mary. When do they begin? Well, I don't think they begin at school. I think they begin at home, and I think they begin in the community. I think if we all looked around at ourselves and, we think about how it is that we deal with each other in the community and what messages we send about people who are tall or people who are short or people who are overweight or people who are, overactive or, people who have tic disorders or people who have thick glasses or, I think that kind of stuff happens really, really early. That's something that's enculturated, and kids come to school with that. In the best case scenario, kids are going to look at each other and they're going to see past the color of skin, and they're going to see past whether someone is a good reader or a bad reader, or someone's going to, if they're a fast runner, or if they're a high jumper, or if they're a great math student, or if they're a particularly good science student. Students are going to make those decisions based on their comfort level. So I think in answer to the question, it's never too early to start, and it's probably really important to start really early, because by the time kids get to school, there's a very small window of opportunity for them to sort of hone those skills and build on those perceptions and those impressions. And schools, as we know, can be, pretty aggressive and unpleasant places for kids who are in some way different. So if the schools don't build that community of care early, and kids don't come in with the perception that different is okay, and that willingness to sort of suspend belief and take everybody, as they are for their strengths and their weaknesses and their differences, I think, we're part of the problem. So I think in answer to the question, When does it begin? It begins really, really early, and it begins at home.
So, Sheldon, sort of going back to the questions that we get from parents. One thing that I wanted to ask you is, what are some of the questions? Because sometimes we hear from parents, well, my kid doesn't want to talk to me about being bullied. They won't open up, or they're worried that they're going to get in trouble by telling me. What are some of the questions that a parent can pose or an educator can pose to a student or a parent to their own child that'll help sort of coax them into speaking about it and opening up a little bit more?
Really good question. Really difficult, but I think part of the solution. Sometimes for some kids, depending upon your relationship with them and how you are all the time, you just come out and ask, and you say, who did you have lunch with today? Were they nice? Or did you see anything in school that made you upset? Or was there something that really, you saw something that was really exciting to you? Or is there somebody at school who you think needs help and, you wish you would have said something? Or, there are ways that you can sort of prompt and pry that don't have to do with your child, that get them to reflect on things that are happening that mirror their own experience. So that's one approach that for some kids really works well. They're happy to talk about something that happened to someone else, but not about their own experience, and you can get a little bit of a window into what they're seeing and experiencing themselves. I think when kids don't want to go to school, or they don't want to talk about something, or they answer questions with, yeah, it's okay, or I'm not sure, or it's nothing. Kids who come home from school and it's a bruise and they don't want to talk about it, or kids who, when they have an opportunity to invite kids to come for a sleepover or a party, or or a play date, or meeting someone at a pool, or going shopping or to the movies, and they just don't have any friends, or they don't want to throw up any names and don't want to volunteer. Those are hallmark signs of kids who are in some way either scared or isolated or feeling like they are of lesser value. And some of those conversations are hard to initiate, but I think they're incredibly valuable. Sometimes parents will say, "I think this is what I'm feeling. I have no reason to believe. I don't know. Nobody told me, but I think this is what you're feeling or what I'm feeling. Am I right?" And sometimes if you say it, your child will agree or disagree, or give you an example, or say no, but something else. I think it's a very individual. It's very individual to every child and every parent-child relationship. What is absolutely critical is that parents make sure that they don't avoid having those conversations, that they don't shy away from the hard ask, or the hard sharing, or the worrisome question. I asked a child, not too long ago, when was the last time you saw bullying? And they rolled their eyes at me and said, "What are you kidding? I see it every day." And that's not what I would have expected. Same thing goes with kids who bring, knives and guns and bats to school. When was the last time you saw a weapon in school? Well, you wouldn't expect a child to say, yesterday. But, that's what he did. So sometimes you just need to come out and say it. And you need to create a culture where it's okay to talk about those things. Maybe your child doesn't want you to go running to the principal. Maybe they want to, you pinky swear that it's not going any further, and you tell them something that blew you away about work, or about what you saw in the supermarket, or something that you thought was really funny, and then they do the same. And get into the habit of reflecting on how people treat each other. That isn't your child specifically. And then sometimes that will open the window for opportunities for you to get a sense as to what's really going on in their own life.
So I just want to encourage those of you out there who do have a comment or a question to please just press *6 to ask a question. If it doesn't matter what it is, if you just want to pose a statement, some insight that you feel, press *6. Go ahead, 303.
Hi, I am a senior at the Savannah College of Art and Design. I just took a 400 level class with a kid who had ADD, and he was a senior as well. And I've worked with special needs kids in high school, and I'm like a really big activist with the bullying movement. So I definitely feel empathy for kids who kind of have those social quirks that kind of make the other students go like, ooh, I don't know if I want to talk to them. But at the same time, I think there's this level of professionalism that I feel like this kid in particular lacked. And he kind of came to class, and when he kind of wasn't acknowledged, he would do these things that were just really socially inappropriate. And, you know, the teacher would have talks with him, and, you know, sometimes the kids would say like, oh, what are you doing? And the kid would just sort of, you know, like, there would be a really innocent thing. And so I kind of want to, as somebody who is empathetic and somebody who does, you know, I don't want to leave people feeling ignored. But at the same time, you know, I don't know how to deal with a situation like that when it's kind of going against the sense of professionalism. So what do you recommend for handling a situation like that?
Well, let me ask the question. Is this the person who is in the class is a peer of yours? This is a fellow college senior?
Yes. He's not in my degree. It's a pretty big school, but, you know, I mean, we had a class together for 10 weeks, and we did talk to each other.
And do you get a sense that this young man has a community of peers who he feels comfortable with, or is he just so unpredictable and socially out of whack where he's pretty much a loner?
One thing I noticed is that he was a game design major, and I actually have noticed that quite a few autistic and ADD kids were in the game design department at my college. And so I think when he is there, there's a sense of community. But at the same time, I think when he's coming to the class, I think he has this sort of excitement to participate. But again, there were just sort of these things that were really disruptive to the class environment. So, you know, there were just times where he would randomly leave the classroom, or, you know, he would pace around the room, and the teacher, you know, would kindly say, you know, hey, can you sit down? And I really have to praise my teacher for having patience. I think he did step out a few times to, you know, talk about good ways for communication, but I can tell over time that there was a sense of impatience, not only with my teacher, but with my peers. Right. Well, yeah. A very difficult question. You know, these are the kinds of situations that will arise in college. They'll arise in the workplace. You know, if you have somebody who makes everybody else nuts but is a great employee, you know, what do you do? I mean, what's the balance between protecting their right to get up and make noises and be quirky, and your right to need a quiet environment and to be able to focus and do your work without disruption? So, you know, it really is a balance. I think your responsibility as a member of that peer community is to be encouraging of that person, to be friendly to them. If you have a relationship with them, help them understand that there are times when there are things that they do that are disruptive to everyone else. If you could set up a series of cues where, you know, they look over at you and you give them a thumbs up, or you give them a thumbs down, or, you know, you say to them, sit next to me, and I'll, you know, when I tap your desk, it means that you're too loud, or, you know, if you have the patience and the interest and the wherewithal to do those kinds of things, those could be helpful, but it's not your job. And yeah, that's a line that I don't want to come across because, you know, as much as I care, and I really appreciate the advice you give me, and I will definitely use it. You know, I'm not this person's teacher, and it's not my goal. I'm just a peer, and I feel like it isn't my responsibility to be this kid's teacher. But I also feel like it, you know, if we're talking about class culture and the ability to create a supportive environment, I absolutely agree that, you know, if we can kind of say good for you or a thumbs up, and I did notice that some of my peers did that. So it was an art history class, so I think that there was a higher level of intellectualism, and I think for him being a game design major, he had a very youthful maturity stance, which isn't necessarily bad, but what I've noticed, and I noticed this with myself, is that when there's a certain class culture and class dynamic, it's sort of like you can participate, you can stand out, but in the end, the class culture is what it is. And if you don't belong, it's kind of like difficult to associate that. And, you know, I think the best thing we can do is to break those barriers. But I have noticed teachers who, you know, acknowledge that it is what it is. And if you're not included, then you're not included.
Right. No, it's a dance. I think the ultimate responsibility is with the teacher, you know, the professor, and the school. And if there are ways that the class can come together and be supportive, I think, you know, it's worth doing that. You know, the teacher might have also said, let's get a small group of kids together with this individual student, and let's sit down and say, what is it that you like about this class? And everyone would share what it is, and the student would as well. And then everyone can say, and this is what I most dislike about this class. And maybe just hearing from other students that part of what is making it less pleasurable is some of this disruptive and you know, constant movement and chatter and getting up and down, and you know, and just hearing that from a peer group in a way that isn't aggressive could make a difference. Now, that's not something you should orchestrate. That's something that the school or the professor might. But I think at a certain level, it really is the responsibility of the leadership. Again, it's a matter of leadership. Make a decision about what constitutes a safe, caring, nurturing community. And if one person, for whatever reason, can't abide by the rules of that community, it may not be the right place for them.
So I think, Sheldon, we have time for about one more question, and I'm just going to bring that in right now. Are you there? Hello?
Hi, my name is Jeremy Harmon. I'm a stutterer, and one of my good friends, he has ADHD, and he's a real. He always spends time in the house every during the weekends, and he says he wants to hang out with all these kids, and I always ask him to come to places, and he always says no. My main question is, how can I get my friend more involved socially?
Well, Jeremy, thank you for the call and thank you for the question. You sound like a really good friend, and I think this particular friend is lucky to have you as his friend. You know, I think going out is one option, and coming in is another option. I mean, if this is a friend who will come to your house because he knows and trusts you and feels safe, you might orchestrate that and have 2 or 3 other kids join at your house, so that he begins to feel comfortable and he feels part of the mix. Similarly, you might say, you know what, maybe we can set up an outing. We can all go to the movies. Maybe not at his house, because he may feel weird having lots of people come to his house, and that may be anxiety provoking in and of itself. But to meet somewhere, and you and your friend could be there as sort of the guys who are orchestrating this, and everyone can sit by themselves, or you could decide to go out for ice cream afterwards, or you could sit with each other in the movie or not, but just that the invitation happened because you organized it, those kinds of things, I think, could begin to build a level of trust and initiative and a sense of how included he feels. It sounds like, for whatever reason, he's not just being antisocial. There's got to be something there that that he wants to do and feels incapable of doing. So maybe break it up into the smallest little pieces, and see if there's something you guys can orchestrate together that's not stressful. I wouldn't wait for him to initiate, but maybe you can do it with him. That might be one idea.
So Sheldon, there is one more question we got here, and I think it'd be good for us to take that. How's that sound?
Sure.
So we've got a call in from 864.
Yeah, my name is Angel. I'm from South Carolina, and I have a child with special needs. And I have to admit, I'm just a little offended by the comments made regarding the college students when it was said, you maybe have one person that's driving everyone nuts. And I'm like, the comment is a bit of a bully comment. My thought is, your response is your responsibility. He's not driving you nuts. You're responding to what he's doing. I am offended a little bit, and my hat off to the young lady who wants to be there to help her peer. And you want to know what? As friends, we're called to help each other. It's not just the teacher's job. If it was a typical person and something was going on, we'd be right beside them to help them. Please don't say it's not your job. As friends, it is our job to be there for each other, and especially when bullying happens. Your comment actually came across a little bit like bullying.
Well, let's, Sheldon, if you could speak to that a little bit. How can peers in the classroom who are not learning disabled or don't have do not have a learning disability, how can we be more respectful of that without also maybe being coming across as too aggressive or potentially bullying, when in fact we are trying to just help somebody understand that it's disruptive?
Well, thank you, Angel. I in no way intended any of my comments to be offensive, and what I hope I didn't communicate was that my answer had anything to do with being dismissive of this person as an individual, recognizing that he has some unique needs that need to be addressed, but that make it difficult for him to be in that social situation. I don't think it's everyone's responsibility to fix every challenge that everybody has. I think in this particular situation, this young woman was fabulous in the way that she wanted to be able to assert herself in some way and find a solution, and acknowledged herself that it wasn't her responsibility, but she didn't really know what to do about that, and she didn't know how far to take it. Again, I think in a school situation, which is voluntary, I think it's about leadership. It's about facilitating a solution. I in no way would suggest that this young man not be included in the workings of the class. I think there may be some other solution to finding a way to do it that isn't disruptive for other students who also have needs and who are entitled, just as this student is, to the benefit of instruction and the benefit of the opportunity to be in an academic setting. So I think the problem solving should take place in the context of whose class it is and the goals of the class, how students are expected to participate, how they can be helped to participate. I think this young woman didn't want to take responsibility, but was willing to be part of the solution, and for that she gets huge amount of credit. And I think we should all applaud that kind of willingness to look at the situation, not just the person, not just the behavior, look at the situation and see how, if there's something that we can change about the culture that will help everyone feel included and valued, that's the way to do it. I do think that everyone has, I don't want to say the right, because it's not about my right and your right, but I think the value of everyone's presumption that everyone is entitled to be treated fairly and with respect, at a certain point that needs to be vetted through a particular lens. And it may be that in some situations, certain types of behavior are not appropriate and need to be communicated in ways that are not aggressive or hurtful, but it's the leadership, it's the professor, it's the school that needs to take ownership of that and needs to do it in a respectful and mindful way. So again, I hope that my comments were not understood as in any way offensive. It's not what I had intended. It's a very tricky situation because you're talking about adults and you're talking about a higher education environment, and you're talking about people who are there not because they have to be there, but because they want to be there. So I hope that clarified in some way.
Great, thank you, Sheldon. I think that that's actually incredibly important for us to discuss because it is and can be at moments an unfortunate issue of contention. But I do want to wrap there because we've been on the line for about an hour. But Sheldon, before we do wrap, if there's anything else that you wanted to share for our community tonight, please go ahead and do so.
Well, the only thing I would like to do is say thank you to the Bully Project and to all of the callers, certainly those who were able to get through on the line and those of you who are listening. Continue to do the incredibly powerful and impactful work that you're doing. The organization that I work for, the National Center for Learning Disabilities, has lots of really good information about LD, about attention deficit disorder, about related disorders of attention and behavior. The website is www.ld.org, and I encourage everyone to spend time on the site. Everything that's there is free, and we have lots and lots of resources that we developed in concert with the Bully Project that I think could be really helpful. Basically, I think the message is one that we all embrace. The takeaway for me is when we think about bullying, I think we have to think about it from the perspective that it's important to listen to our heads and to listen to our brains, but I think we also need to follow our hearts. And if we do that together, we'll be able to stop bullying from claiming the next child as its victim.
Well, thank you so much, Sheldon. We're really, really lucky to have you tonight. And for those of you who've joined us tonight and would like to re-listen to the call or would like to share it, we're going to be sharing it on our Facebook page, facebook.com/bullymovie, or on our Twitter page, twitter.com/bullymovie. And please also head to our website to RSVP for our other conference calls. Next week, we're going to be speaking with Facing History in Ourselves, who's actually helped us implement Bully as a bullying prevention tool in the classroom across the country. We're crucial in our 1 Million Kids campaign that's now helped us get Bully to over 3 million students across the country. But again, I encourage you to head to our website, thebullyproject.com, to RSVP for next week's call. Thank you all so much for attending tonight. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us at info@thebullyproject.com. With the header expert series, and we'll try and get those questions off to Sheldon or whoever you're trying to get in touch with as soon as possible. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Sheldon, and have a great